Hey, all of you What's the Scuttlebutt podcast listeners. I'm Jeff Copsetta. And this year for Memorial Day, all three of your hosts here have decided to adopt a veteran of the greatest generation and tell a little bit of their story. I decided to adopt First Lieutenant Bert Stiles. I'd like to read you an excerpt from his memoirs. Chapter 18. So to finish up. It is summer, and there is war all over the world. The war has spread from Normandy to Brittany, and the American columns are swinging in towards Paris. There's still plenty of war in Russia. The same war is still going on in the islands and in the sky over Japan. I can only think about it in terms of moments, chunks and stretches of eternity measured in minutes. So far, I've lived through it. So far, the Lady of Luck has let me come through. There is hope as bright as the sun that it will end soon. I hope it does. I hope the hell it does. It will be a long time before I have made up my mind about this war. I'm an American. I was lucky enough to be born below the mountains in Colorado. But someday, I would like to be able to say I live in the world and let it go at that. The trouble with me is, I don't even know how to start to build my share of the one world. So if I get through this, I will have to get on the ball and learn something about economics and people and things. If that is vague, it is because I do not know where to start to be specific. In the end, it is only people that count, all the people in the whole world. Any land is beautiful to someone. Any land is worth fighting for to someone. So it isn't the land. It is the people. That is what the war is about, I think. Beyond that, I can't go very far. So if we can get through this, with this war, then I'll get started. And that is where Lieutenant Bert Stiles' memoir ends, just as abruptly as his life. Bert Stiles was a student at Colorado College in 1942 when he joined the American Army Air Force. He received his commission in November 1943 and went overseas to Great Britain in March 1944. He was awarded the Air Medal and the Distinguished Flying Cross and was a veteran of 35 bombing missions. Instead of returning to America when leave was due to him, he requested to be transferred to fighters. On November 26, 1944, he was shot down in a P-51 on an escort mission to Hanover, Germany. He died at the age of 23. Bert Stiles is buried at the Ardennes American Cemetery in Belgium. And so for First Lieutenant Bert Stiles, for all of the greatest generation that we lost in the Second World War, and to you, our listeners, we thank you and we wish you a very happy Memorial Day.
Hey guys, I'm Henry Sledge. On this Memorial Day weekend, I want to commemorate Captain Andrew Haldane, U.S. Marine Corps. Captain Haldane was my father's commanding officer in K-35. This is what my dad wrote about Haldane. Captain Haldane served with the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal and was commanding officer of Company K at Cape Gloucester, where he won the Silver Star. During a 5-day battle, he and his Marines repulsed 5 Japanese bayonet charges within 1 hour in the pre-dawn darkness. He led Company K through most of the fight for Peleliu. On 12 October 1944, 3 days before the Marines came off the lines, he died in action. The Marines of Company K and the rest of the division who knew him suffered no greater loss during the entire war. Of the day that Captain Haldane was taken from us, this is what my father wrote. Never in my wildest imagination had I contemplated Captain Haldane's death. We had a steady stream of killed and wounded leaving us, but somehow I assumed Ak was immortal. Our company commander represented stability and direction in a world of violence, death, and destruction. Now his life had been snuffed out. We felt forlorn and lost. It was the worst grief I endured during the entire war. The intervening years have not lessened it any. Captain Andy Haldane wasn't an idol. He was human. But he commanded our individual destinies under the most trying conditions with the utmost compassion. We knew he could never be replaced. He was the finest Marine officer I ever knew. The loss of many close friends grieved me deeply on Peleliu and Okinawa, but to all of us, The loss of our company commander at Peleliu was like losing a parent.
Good afternoon. This year for Memorial Day, I would like to share with you guys the story of one Private Joe Gandra of the 82nd Airborne. On June 9, 1944, a new American offensive was launched by the 325th Collider Infantry Regiment outside of Lafayette, France, but was broken up on the western end of the causeway. Private Gandra's detachment came under heavy oppressive enemy fire from machine guns, pinning the men to the ground for 4 hours. At which point, Joe Gandra voluntarily advanced towards the enemy positions all alone, firing his machine gun from the hip. As he advanced towards the enemy position, he successfully took out 3 machine guns. As he continued his assault on the enemy's positions, Joe Gandra was cut down by enemy fire and was fatally wounded. Private Joe Gandra's sacrifice, heroism, and bravery went largely unnoticed until he was posthumously rewarded the Medal of Honor in 2014 by President Barack Obama. And so this year, on Memorial Weekend, we hope that you all take a moment to remember those who gave it all to fight for freedom.
Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy and Jeff Copsetta.
One of the greatest fears I had was, would I be able to do my job? Because never having been under fire, never having been in the stress of combat, everybody goes through that. And that was the greatest fear you had at any time, was would you measure up in the eyes of your buddies? And that was probably one of the greatest motivating factors to all of us. I think a great deal of it was based on the fact that it was so instilled in us that you can't let another Marine down. So consequently, you wanted to always measure up and do your best. The pre-landing bombardment had commenced. The din and the noise was so absolutely incredible, it's indescribable. You couldn't even yell to the man right next to you and have him hear you. I was absolutely scared to death, and so was everybody else. And the main thing that concerned me was I was afraid I was going to wet my pants. And yeah, I looked at the island, and all you could see, it just looked like a thin line. It was just a sheet of flame backed by just this huge black wall of smoke. And I thought, my God, none of us will ever get out of that place. All up and down the beach, shells were going off. Amtraks were getting hit on the beach before they could let the guys out. You could see guys falling all along the beach because of the extremely heavy small arms fire and artillery and waterfall. So we got in off the beach as far as we could go and hit the deck in the sand. And just before I hit the deck, I happened to look down, and my right foot missed no more than by 6 inches. A Japanese mine that was in the form of a 500-pound bomb buried in the sand, and it had a metal pressure plate on the top of it. A little way down the beach, I saw a boy step on one, and it just atomized him. He just disappeared.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, a very special episode if we were to borrow phrases from the early 70s TV shows like NBC and CBS, with my co-host, as you heard, Jeff Copsetta, and our very, very special guest, the one and only Henry Sledge. Jeff, Henry, how are you guys doing tonight?
Doing well.
Couldn't be better.
So, as you guys just heard, that was a little clip you guys can find on YouTube of the one and only Eugene Sledge talking about his experiences landing on Peleliu. And joining us tonight is his youngest son, Henry, who's going to, share some of their family's experiences with, growing up with their father being who he is and his post-war years. And obviously talk about his book and how the production of the HBO Pacific's come along. And we've been talking for about 30, 40 minutes before the show. And now that we're live, Bailey's in the other room playing with her squeaky toy, as you can hear. Which, by the way, Henry, I was ecstatic. Last night I was reading the final chapters of the China Marine.
Yeah.
And we all know that your father's dog, Deacon, passed away when he was on Okinawa. But he said when he came home, your grandmother's dog, Captain, the Boston Terrier, which I'm a huge Boston Terrier fan, that's what Bailey is, came to greet him at the house. And so it warmed my heart to know that your father came home to a Boston Terrier, which was there to greet him and warm his bed at night, because I'm a huge Boston Terrier.
I don't know if that dog is in this picture or not. I think Deacon's in that picture.
Yeah.
Don't know if you can see it very well.
I can't get over this. Jeff and I, for those of y'all following along at home, we've had the unreal experience of getting text messages of photos of your father's P-41, the K-Bar, family photos, and it's just unreal to have you here. And I guess first and foremost, we need to give a big thank you to Galen Wagner, who has been on the show for putting us together. I guess I'll leave it to you. Explain to the audience how we came to be here and how you and Galen got hooked up and how I got a weird text message at 7 a.m. Said, "Hey, would you be interested in having Henry Sledge on your show?" Sure.
Yeah. So to put some perspective on that, guys, there is a Facebook group called World War II in the Pacific. I joined that, or I think I was invited to join it, but I joined it, and the Museum of the Marine Corps, I think it was, they do this thing called Marine Monday. And they put a post up. I mean, I had no idea this was going to happen. This kind of stuff just happens all the time. They put a post up about my dad. It showed a picture of him in his dress blues. Very iconic picture. And they had a blurb about him, about a paragraph talking about his biography in the book and all that. And that got shared onto the World War II in the Pacific Facebook group. And I went on there and looked at it, and people were just really responding to it. And it was heartwarming to me, of course. So I put a post on there saying, "Hey, I'm E.B. Sledge's son. It's been suggested to me that I should at some point in the future, do a podcast on my dad because I'm passionate about PTO history as well as just my dad's legacy. Would anybody be interested in that?" Galen was one of the people, and it was a huge response. I mean, it just blew me away. But Galen was one of the people who responded to that. And, he hit like and he put a comment, and I saw his name. I could tell he lived in the Mobile area, which of course I love Mobile. My brother lives in Fairhope. And he said, "I've got a friend, Don Abernathy. He does a World War II podcast. I can hook you guys up." And so that's kind of how we got to be where we are, Don.
And so you and I got to chatting, and then I sent Jeff a text. And Jeff, what did you think when the text message came across your phone?
I couldn't believe it. I think I was down in Crystal Beach still when you sent me that, and it was just, everybody in the greatest generation is equally important for our success in World War II and who we are today, but there are some that are sometimes a little extra special, and sometimes it's the help of a book or, of course, a movie that kind of helps highlight who these ordinary people were that did extraordinary things. And Henry, of course, your dad definitely fell into that category as one of those extraordinary, among his generation. So, our little podcast is, it's been growing, and it's been really enjoyable to be able to share Don and our passion, to be able to talk about it with people in a podcast, it's something that a lot of people don't get to do, so anytime we have a guest on here or whatever, it's refreshing, to be able to share, for us to be an avenue for you to share, like you said, about your dad's legacy. So I'm just proud to be a part of it.
Well, hey, thank you guys for having me. I mean, like I told Don, I hope you got a lot of questions, because I do better answering questions than.
Well, absolutely. And Jeff and I are both honored to have you use our podcast as a way for you to, determine whether or not you want to get into something like this. And we're very grateful. But with that being said, let's get into a little bit. Obviously, with the Old Breed, I think the first publishing was in 1981. And as you and I are talking off the air, obviously, when that book came out, it was a huge book. And but a majority of the people who read the book were people who had interest in World War II. And so what was things like when the book came out for your family, for your father? I know you're telling us that you remember the original manuscripts, your mom was typing it up. Do you remember those times when your mom and your dad were spending hours, I would assume, him, looking into the Bible, which you have? Jeff, you ready for this? Show Jeff the Bible. The Bible is sitting there on his desk, the Bible that we've all seen.
Are we streaming on YouTube right now?
Yes, we're streaming on YouTube.
Okay.
And so when your dad
got it in this case, I'm sorry about that, but this thing has been pawed over by Ken Burns, Tom Hanks, you name it. And my mom finally just said, Henry, put that thing in a case. I'm tired of people pawing through it. They're going to tear the cover off. And I mean, we understand why.
Yep.
Please don't think I say that with any irritability at all. But that's the Bible.
Well, Jeff, being someone who's worked in many museums, he can definitely understand the importance of what, and people don't realize this, especially when it comes to paper artifacts. Every single time you open it once, think about comic book nerds who have that early edition of Superman or Spider-Man or whatever. They don't want to ever take it out of that plastic sleeve, and because they know every time a finger, even with gloves on, every time you open that up, there's just risk involved. And so definitely with something like that, you got to protect.
Right. Well, so you were asking me if I was reading the question right about early memories of the book. I mean, I can remember, so when I was born until the time I was 7 years old, 8 years old, we lived in a house on Pineview Road, Montevallo. Then we moved to the house where my brother and I really grew up. I remember being 5 or 6 years old, late at night, my dad sitting up by the fireplace, and he always wrote on legal pads. And we actually, all those legal pads are down at Auburn in the archives. I've seen them. But he always wrote in pencil, yellow legal pads. And probably not long after he and my mom got married, which obviously would predate my brother and me, he took the pieces of paper out of the Bible and expounded on those notes and made an outline. Okay. What I remember is getting up late at night and coming through there in my pajamas with little footies on them, Dad, what are you doing? And my dad's nickname for me my whole life, I don't know why, but he called me Big Shot. And I remember saying, Big Shot, I'm just sitting here working on something. And he'd be sitting there, by the fireplace writing. And I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to bed, and he'd send me off to bed. But those are the earliest memories. I remember very well, going to the dime store in Montevallo and getting the plastic bags with the soldiers, the green plastic soldiers.
Yep.
And I would play with those things. And I can remember, now we would have moved at this point, so I'd be like 8 years old or so. I remember being on the floor in the den playing with those little green plastic soldiers and hearing my mom in the laundry room behind the den typing the manuscript.
Wow.
And there was a table, this little rickety table, and I can close my eyes and still see that manuscript just piling up like this. And, my brother and I would take it and read it because it was double spaced, just typed on an old typewriter. And, we would read it. And, of course, what my father's always said, his reason for wanting to write the book was to create a written record for my brother and me to have some understanding of what he went through in World War II. Because we all had an interest in military history. We had ancestors who fought in the Civil War, and it was always fascinating to us to read their letters that they wrote home. And so he wanted to create something for the family to have some idea of what he had seen and experienced as a Marine. And I think it was, my mom was typing this stuff and she, it's well known. She said, Gene, this is pretty extraordinary. You ought to get this published.
Yeah.
And of course, if you had known my dad, he was not a self-aggrandizing person at all. I mean, really self-effacing. And he was like, no, there's no way anybody's going to want to read this, but she persisted. And I remember, a lot of late night conversations. There was a study in our house on the second floor where he spent most of his time. It was on the back side of the house where I grew up. And he would sit in there for hours writing, the manuscript. And of course, they would meet and talk about, we need to get contacts. And he started contacting some old officers that he had known to lend their credibility to it. Austin Schaffner being one of them. And I remember a lot of long phone conversations. I remember man, I can close my eyes and still see this huge manila envelope with the manuscript, and he had sent it to a publisher. And I remember the mail came one day, and he, I walked up to the mailbox with him, and he said, takes this thing out. He said, well, this is probably a rejection. And it was a publisher sending the manuscript back saying, we're not interested.
Wow. I was going to ask you how many he went through before he got accepted.
Third one.
Wow.
Third one was the charm.
It's got to be a little weird that here you are talking to two relative strangers, and you talk about when your parents get married, and I can pick up this book and say, well, your parents got married on March 12th, 1952.
Yeah.
I know from the book, China Marine, if for those of you following along at home or listening to the podcast, I'm sure most of you have read With the Old Breed. Pick up China Marine. This is a very good point, period, stop. It wraps everything up. And you and I are talking about this, that when your father sent in the original manuscript, it basically included a lot of the material from China Marine. But as the book saw editors, they said, okay, you're telling us that they had a page quota that they wanted to stick to?
Wait, say that again now?
You were telling me before the show that they said, hey, we want to keep this within so many pages. And
oh, yeah. So when Presidio Press, who I think has been bought by Random House, when they agreed to publish the book, 1980-ish, and I can remember my dad and my mom talking about this, and they were like, well, hey, this thing's too big for the average person, 300, 320 pages, something like that. Let's keep it around that. Let's have you, the beginning, Peleliu, Okinawa, you come home, let's end it right there. The whole part about doing China Marine, which, my dad's China service, I mean, he cherished those times. That was a healing time for him. And I mean, really, Don, you just read China Marine. It's been years since I read it. That episode, that part in there where they're on the ramparts of that fort watching the Japanese tank column go out at dusk, and my dad, and maybe I'm getting ahead of things. Maybe I shouldn't go into all that.
You can go into it. Well, the reason I bring up is, one, in this book, your father explains that he met your mom at a friend's wedding. But
yes,
to rewind real quick to what you're getting at, I'm a World War II guy, and Jeff, you may be the same way, but then again, you're more military minded. Maybe you knew. I just assumed, okay, 1945. We know from With the Old Breed, the horrible story said on Okinawa, they got to the one shore. They said, okay, turn around, walk the other direction, and clean up the battlefield and bury the dead, which your father was very resentful for.
Right.
Obviously. But the fact that people don't realize that China had a power vacuum, kind of like we're seeing right now over the Middle East. Won't get into that. But China had a power vacuum, and you had the China Nationalist Army, which was allied with the United States, and the Air Force, or the Army Air Corps, was flying in nationalist soldiers trying to get them through northern China. But you had the Communist Party coming up. And as you're saying, here your father was, and other members of his, K-35 who were assigned there, they're sitting in this fort, if you were, and the Japanese who are still there are now fighting on the side of the China nationalists. And for him and for us, the war is over, but he's got artillery flying over his head as he said in there, I don't know what they're thinking, but for some reason the China nationalists, they fire their artillery at the same exact time every night. So by clockwork, so all the communists have to do is get in their bunkers and wait until the 3 minutes pass. But the war's over for him, but here he is, could very well have a short round. There were Marines over there who lost their lives in those skirmishes, protecting those trains. And he's watching these Japanese soldiers, Jeff, if you can imagine this, with a tank, and he's standing there with the same Thompson he had on Okinawa. How do you go from fighting an enemy for 2 years, sleeping in foxholes with one eye open, waiting on a bonsai charge? You're conditioned to shoot when you see one, and now you got a whole platoon walking past you, and you got to prevent from doing what you're trying to do, which is shoot them, because now all of a sudden they're on your team. and he just watching him go out to fight against the help the nationalist Chinese army fight against the Chinese communists. It's just mind blowing that
you're literally seeing. I mean, the way my dad described that, they're on the ramparts of the fort. It's dusk, and their orders were be locked and loaded, but you're there to just don't intervene.
Don't fire unless you're fired upon. Protect yourself.
And he said, he writes here, they hear the
hobble news.
It's a column of like 50 troops and maybe 2 Type 95 tanks. And, the dust is stirred up, the tank's headlights are on, and it's cutting through the dust. And as the tanks pass under them, and the troops are, in their helmets and everything, and the under him, and the commander in one of the turrets has the turret open. He's got his ceremonial headdress, a ceremonial samurai, white gloves, and he looks up at him and salutes as he goes by. And my dad, I remember him and me talking about that. And, but we're up there going, we've been killing these SOBs for 2 years, and now they're our allies. It was literally, if you think about it, and you've already done a great job setting it up, Don, it was the beginning of the Cold War, which defined the period that I grew up in. I remember when the Russians went into Afghanistan in 1977 and being terrified of seeing Leonid Brezhnev. I was like, man, this guy's going to drop a nuclear, he's going to shoot missiles at us. But
not only were they the allies, but they had on the same damn uniform that he was shooting at 6 months before.
Right.
So it's not like, okay, here's Japs, but they're in, uniform change. No, same uniform, same gear, same equipment. And, these guys have PTSD. They've had nightmares. They've been seeing these guys in their sleep, and here they are watching them and just fighting the urge to do what they've been trained to do for years. And it's just, to me, that part was crazy. But he goes on in great detail about his relationships with the family and I want to bring this up. I know during your time growing up, did your father bring up the preacher and the family that he stayed with over in China on throughout your childhood, or was it just come up every once in a while? I think it's Father Marcel.
So you hear so many people say, well, my grandfather was here, there, or wherever, but he never talked about it.
Okay.
For whatever reason, my father was not taciturn about it at all. Okay. I can remember, and if I stray too much in trying to answer your question, I apologize.
No worries.
But, there was, what I'm trying to say is there wasn't much about it all that he didn't talk about. He didn't talk about the blood and the gore when I was a little kid.
Sure.
But, I can remember being out. In fact, there's a picture of me out in the yard. I was probably 4 years old with my little play bench set, workbench in the backyard. And my dad's in the background with his HBT cap, just like you guys are wearing. I know that's a later model actually with a screen printed EGA, but he had his HBT cap, which I've got it back there in the closet behind me. And he would wear it when he'd be out in the yard doing yard work. Now we're talking, 1969 probably. It's a lot more threadbare now.
I'm sure.
But I've got it. But, I can remember, but to stick to your question about the Chinese family, my knowledge of that was not so factual. I was aware that he had been in China after World War II.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Dr. Song, his family. Funny thing, you're talking about my hat. It's very hard to find reproductions that don't have the EGA on it, and Jeff can attest this. I did find one. It's actually on a slow boat from China right now. I did find one on eBay the other day, and it says no logo, because when I bought this one's actually close to 7 years old now. It's got rust spots on it. It's super salty from the Florida sun. It looks great, but I wish it didn't have the EGA on it, but I actually have one coming.
Did World War II Impressions? I think I got one from them years ago.
This particular one, when I first got into the hobby, I got this one off eBay years ago, but go ahead, Jeff. You've ordered a lot of uniforms from these guys.
Yeah, maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought it was identical to the cover that the Army was issued.
No, it's got a shorter bill on it, and it has these. The Army one is more rounded, whereas the Marine Corps kind of had these, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say seams on them, or inseams. It kind of makes these little points, whereas the Army one's more rounded like a baseball cap. And the bill's a little shorter.
I'd have to step away from the camera, but I can get my dad's if you want to see it.
By all means.
All right. Give me a minute.
And that's something, Jeff, maybe we can do on the next episode. I have my Army one. They are a little different, believe it or not. But yeah, I think the bills are a little shorter. I could be wrong, but they seem to have a little bit of a different shape.
It could be the bill. I mean, I know you can kind of shape an Army to look like an 8-point cover.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know maybe there is a difference. I thought they were quite similar.
No, they
but yeah,
got a little bit different to them.
It could be different.
But yeah, so definitely for you guys, and we're going to get into with the old breed and the making of the Pacific WOW, and that's actually his pen, EJ, on there.
Yes.
That's amazing.
It's, it's pretty well worn, but
does it ever occur to you that these things that you have, people would just die to just remotely even have one item in their collection? Like, show everybody at home the K-bar. And I want to bring this up. In the China Marine, at the very end, when he gets home, he went to Camp Lejeune. He had to fill out a document, and they had an itemized list of all the things that you were expected to return. And the two things that he said he intentionally did not return, he listed as lost in the war, was that K-bar knife and his haversack. Did you see that haversack? Was that haversack around your house growing up? Do you guys still have the haversack? This is mind-blowing to me. That's amazing.
Can you see his name?
Yeah, it's right there, Sledgehammer.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff was, again, because of... Oh, I didn't. So you guys want to see the 45 he carried.
Now, Jeff, you're very familiar with the HBO of the Pacific, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Of course, and Henry and I were talking about this. That is the gun that Henry's grandfather sent to his father. And now, for those of you watching at home or listening to the podcast, you think, wait a minute, in the HBO of the Pacific, he was sent a revolver. And Henry and I had a very long discussion about this before we went on the air when we were doing troubleshooting. Apparently, that was a decision made by, well, according to the scuttlebutt that was passed down through Henry's connection with the production, is that was a last-minute decision, allegedly perhaps made by Dick Dye. But Henry was explaining to me that during the production, and maybe we should back up a little bit, but anyhow, we'll get to it. He was sending photos of his dad's stuff, including that 45. And then when he went and saw the rough cut, he was as shocked as we are now. Cause I always just assumed that your grandfather sent him the revolver and not, that was his grandfather's World War I issue, 1911.
Well, yeah, actually you are correct. It is a Springfield Armory. And somewhere around here, I don't know, we moved a little over a year ago, but I do have the document. I have the document where my grandfather went down to Mobile County Sheriff Department and got permission from them to send this to my dad who was overseas. And I remember, I can still hear my dad talking about it. We came down the gangplank of the ship when I came home because I'm like, Dad, do you have your helmet? Do you what about your rifle? What about your carbine, your Tommy gun? No, we had to turn all that stuff in. But he said, when I came down the gangplank, they had a lieutenant there checking everybody off, making sure we didn't keep stuff. And he said, I had my 45. And I remember him saying, I told him, sir, this is my personal property. I have a paper to prove. And the lieutenant just waved him on.
Yeah. Jeff, you have any particular questions about anything really before we get into, because Henry has some pretty interesting stuff about how the production came and his family being contacted to get involved with with the production. But before we get into that, you have any questions for Henry?
Yeah. We're like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes in this episode. I'm still starstruck. I'm speechless, man. I'm just enjoying it.
It's not because of me. It's good,
Well, to be fair, yes, it's for who your father is, but it'd be like a Yankee fan sitting down and having the opportunity to talk to the son of Babe Ruth. You know what I mean? It's just, not to put them in the same realm, but because, and your father kind of pointed out in China Marine, he kind of feels, because he is a member of a staggering low number of men who did not get wounded or died in those campaigns from the 1st Marine Division. And he kind of mentions in here, he almost feels like it was because it was up to him to share the story, to get that book out.
Yeah.
And so because your father is one of, let's say, 7 voices of that era, at least in the mainstream, vernacular. Obviously, there's a bunch of books on it, but we're talking about in the mainstream realm, the realm of my normal 43-year-old counterpart who doesn't spend all their time producing podcasts and reading World War II stuff. The guy who's flipping through Spike TV or HBO and sees the Pacific on his Amazon list or Band of Brothers. We're talking about those people. The fact that mainstream people who aren't in World War II know who your father is, it's kind of a big deal.
Well, I actually, and I can't remember, we've texted back and forth a lot, Don. I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but so Sid Phillips, was my dad's best friend.
Mm-hmm. And that was on my list.
And I read, and Jeff, I heard you plug in Adam Makos. Adam's a really good friend of mine. We worked together on a lot of stuff when the Pacific came out, but I am actually reading his book, Voices of the Pacific, right now and really enjoying it. But Sid's talked to a lot. I grew up calling Sid Uncle Sid.
Well, that's what I was going to say to you as well, not to cut you off, is not only is your father E.B. Sledge, but your uncle is Sid Phillips. I mean, that's two people who put two, proverbial uncle, but yes.
Away, but it was always, Uncle Sid. I mean, I never called him anything but that. Now, we would go years and not see him. When he's busy raising his family, my dad was busy with my brother and me. So, but of course, when I did see him as a kid, I mean, we never talked about World War II stuff, but I did know that he and my dad were best friends and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, but he mentioned in Voices of the Pacific, it's actually on Valor Studios' website. There is a letter, and I never even knew about this, that my dad wrote him in sometime back in the 80s, I guess. And Sid was talking about how, we would go to First Marine Division reunions, and Eugene would come up to my room and just because he was such a celebrity. And I'm telling you, if you knew my dad, there's nothing he would have hated more. And he just would go to Sid's room and hide out. He wanted to see his buddies, but, everybody wanted to meet him and introduce him to their wives and all that. And he was he could be very well spoken and very outspoken, but just not at all self-aggrandizing, But yeah, I remember that really well.
There's got to be a part of you, because I know, and believe it or not, we are getting down to that 5-minute mark, so we are going to take a break, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Pacific, and then if you're up for it, Henry, maybe we'll have you on the next episode and we can talk about some other stuff, because time just flies by so fast.
I know, man. I feel like I've hardly gotten started.
Exactly. And so maybe we'll take a break, we'll come back, we'll cover a little bit of the Pacific stuff, and then we'll have you back for the next episode. If everybody's cool with that, I'm sure the audience will be great. But there's got to be a part of you now, all these years later, now that sadly Sid has passed as well, that when you fired up the Pacific this weekend, and there he is in living color and HD, there had to be a part of you that was so glad that he had the opportunity to sit down and have his image captured at the beginning of those episodes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember, in fact, the documentary that you played the clip from, that was 1991. I remember when he and my mom went out of town to go do that, because Bill Layden was there, Bergen was there, Jay DeLoe was there. I remember that really well. And, I'll tell you this, and it's kind of sad, but it does speak to being glad that my father did share those experiences despite how emotionally eviscerating they were for him. Every time he would be interviewed for something, he would come home and, he would be sick.
Oh, I'm sure.
He would just be, physically sick. Blood pressure would be all out of whack. He'd be you could just tell he was a mess. And he would get over it. The point was driven home, and you really see it in the Okinawa episode and part 10, where, this young man was just gutted, as they all were. And, of course, Sid famously said, "Oh, just forget about all that. Can't dwell on it." Well, my dad did dwell on it, and he dwelled on it to the point of writing, a book or 2 books, if you want to be technical about it. But he carried a lot with him. But I mean, I want to, because they talked about this in the Ken Burns thing too. Don't ever think that it got the better of him. I mean, he conquered that. He got a PhD in biology. He married a beautiful woman, my mom. He treated her like a goddess. He raised me. He raised my brother. I mean, he was a fantastic dad. We had a great relationship. He didn't burden us with any of that emotional baggage, if you will. I mean, he did it right, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I was just thinking, your father's coming back from doing these interviews and these TV specials and all that back in the 80s and 90s, because there's quite a few of them on YouTube. And you're talking about how he'd come home emotionally drained. And in the back of my mind, because I'm just fresh off of reading it, in the back of the book, he's saying that how he was able at a certain point to go to sleep at night is he had a recipe. He would sit there when he was going to school to get his master's degree in biology, he would sit there and think about plants and animals and all that. And he said he would basically do an hour worth of research or an hour worth of studying at night, and then that would turn his dreams into biological stuff and not stuff of the war. And so I'm thinking here is 1990s. He's already been a professor. He's already got his master's degree. He's already been doing his work, and he's probably comes home and goes up and probably reads about biology for an hour just to subside all the thoughts that he just talked about for an 8-hour recording session that day.
Sure.
So we're going to take a quick break. You guys hold tight there, who's watching on YouTube and Facebook, and we're going to make us a quick turnaround. Hold tight, and we will be right back. And we are back from that quick interlude. If you guys want to help us support the show and help us prevent in the future from doing things like that, please head over to the WTSPWWII.com and sign up for Patreon. Patreon's $1 a month. You can help support the show. You get access to exclusive content. And if you sign up for the $7.40 a month plan, you'll get a free t-shirt after month 2. And also, while you're at the website, WTSPWWII.com, go ahead and click on the social link and find our YouTube channel and subscribe to that. And as always, this episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast is brought to you by our friends at Computers. At Computers has been providing IT solutions for Southwest Florida since 2004. And even if you don't live in Southwest Florida, they can help you by giving them a call at 239-283-1120. With your assistance, as long as your internet works, of course, they can run your computer and help you with all your computer programs. Now that we got all that stuff out of the way, let's get back to it. Once again, we are here with Jeff and Henry Sledge. Jeff, do you have any, I'll let you go ahead and let's get into the Pacific television show side of this. And you have any questions or lead-ups for that you want to help toss in here?
I guess it's inevitable we're going to have to talk about the miniseries eventually with Henry. And I know nobody's asked him about it before. I don't have anything specific. I was actually hoping that maybe some of our listeners would kind of would creep in here and have a question about something with production or a detail here and there. I don't have any specifically. I mean, I'm pretty well aware of that intensive project that it must have been, and that there's people like Don and I that if there is inaccuracy, we're gonna point it out and be the ones to bring it to light. As opposed to
right.
They got right. I try not to do that. I try to kind of, give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And like I said, when Don mentioned about Dale Dye making that call last minute, basically essentially changed the 1911 to a revolver. There's got to be some underlying reason why he did that, and not that we may necessarily agree with it, but Hollywood is Hollywood, and they've got there had to be a reason. I don't think they just changed history just to change history to be different. I could be mistaken, but I appreciate what they do. And I did just want to say, Henry, that I wish I had the opportunity, and I truly, sincerely mean this. I wish I had the opportunity to thank your dad, not for what he did during the war, not for what he did when he got home from the war, but for giving the opportunity to the mainstream to know people like Ak Haldane, the guys that didn't come home. That
Hillbilly.
we would have never known who they were if it wasn't for people like your dad. Because I can tell you firsthand, the guys that come home, it's not who it has to be about. It has to be, so people will read your book. They want to know your story. But I'm pretty certain your dad would feel the same way as I do, is to use him to know about the other boys that didn't come home, because that's what everything was always about. And I thank your dad for giving the people who have seen the miniseries, the people who have read his books or read Hugh Ambrose's book, to know about boys like that didn't get the chance to come home and tell their story.
Right. Yeah, he would have said the same thing. The heroes are the ones who didn't make it home.
And if anybody's listening, I'm not listening because you won't be able to hear this until tomorrow. But if anybody's watching on YouTube or Facebook, if you have questions for Henry, we can try this. Give us a call at 239-299-3352. This will be your opportunity. And if you're a little gun shy, maybe send us an email to mailcall@WTSPWWII.com, and we'll read your questions for Henry the next time Henry comes on. Give us a brief rundown, if you will. You're explaining to me through phone conversations and text messages that one day you just got a call, I believe, from your brother saying, hey, someone in Hollywood's trying to gain rights to Dad's book. How did the whole thing come to play to your all's family?
2004. And the thing was, somebody years ago, and I don't remember if it was in the 80s or the 90s, somebody had bought the film rights to it and wanted to do something with it. And that never did get any traction.
I'm so glad that didn't come to fruition, because just the way technology was and storytelling, it wouldn't have been nowhere what it is today.
But yeah, it was 2004. I had probably finished watching Band of Brothers for the 783rd time. And, of course, was very familiar with Saving Private Ryan and the whole, Hank Spielberg treatment. And I mean, I can even remember having phone conversations with my brother about, man, I mean, I know World War II is not your thing, but God, Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, it was so powerful, so visceral. Can you imagine what it would be like if they did something with Dad's book? And, my brother was like, man, the World War II has been done and done and done. I mean, it'll never happen.
One more reason to
2004, spring of 2004 to be exact, my brother started getting some pings that people were making inquiries as to the film rights. And so we found out Bruce McKenna, that he was interested in starting that process. And it was April of 2004, I believe, when my mother and I were flown out to Hollywood, and we sat down and so was Sid Phillips, by the way. And we sat down and were interviewed and met with Hugh Ambrose was alive at the time, and Bruce McKenna. And really, despite I had some slightly contentious conversations with Bruce in the wake of the miniseries, or when it was, about some things that artistically were being done. But I mean, really, Bruce was the one, and he deserves the credit, and I'm grateful to Bruce McKenna. He recognized the impact, because the way he explained it to us, we sat down when we got out there, and he said, so Tom and Stephen were just blown away by Band of Brothers, how successful it's been. And there's this palpable feeling that we need to do something for the guys in the Pacific. And Tom's all about that. He wants to do it. And he came to me, let's do something for the guys in the Pacific. Well, Bruce held up a copy of my dad's book and says, if you were going to do that, you have to have this book. And it was with the Old Breed. And there you go. And the Tom Lee classic 2,000-yard stair painting. And so that is a very simplified version of how the process started. And, we all went out to dinner that night. And I remember Bruce and Kirk Sadusky was with us too. And I remember Bruce saying, look, this is going to be a long process. And I would also say, in the nascent stages, the plan was to be 13 parts and 5 main characters. And I remember that very well. And so it was going to be Lecky, Sledge, Basilone. The fourth character was going to be a naval aviator. He was at Midway. Was it
Vernon? Yeah, Vernon McKeel.
No, it wasn't him. It was Elder, Robert Elder, or was it Best?
I think Vernon was in Hughes' book. That he was a Dauntless pilot at Midway.
I thought it was either Robert Elder or Richard Best, and Lord, I've read so many naval aviation World War II books, I should know, but I have been away from it for a while, and I'm just getting back into it. But he was going to be a character, and the fifth character, I honestly don't even remember. I don't even remember who the fifth character was supposed to be. But 13 parts, 5 characters. That was the idea. Because they wanted, I think I remember Bruce saying, yeah, Stephen really wants to do the entire panoply of the Pacific War from start to wants to cover all of it. So, roll on through as the years went by, it got whittled down to where it was, okay, it's going to be 10 parts and it's going to be 3 characters. And guys, I don't know how well known it is, but it almost didn't happen. There was the ball almost got dropped.
Really?
Yes. It was when Flags of Our Fathers came out, I can remember when they were working that movie up. I remember the discussion because Flags of Our Fathers came out, was it 2006?
I can look.
Yeah, I think it was 2006.
The Pacific was not officially in the expression that Bruce used with us through the whole process was getting greenlit.
Mm-hmm.
Getting greenlit. This thing, it doesn't matter what we do, how much money we spend, who we talk to, how excited we get. If it's not greenlit, it doesn't happen. And greenlit is where the suits at HBO sit down with Tom Hanks and whoever, and they go, okay, you're greenlit, go. We'll start writing the checks. 2004 was our initial meeting in Hollywood that I just told you about. It did not get greenlit until 2008.
Wow.
So Flags of Our Fathers came out, and I remember, I went and saw it, and my perception of it was it didn't really do that well. And if I remember correctly, I can't remember if Bruce told me this, or he might have told my brother, and then my brother told me. I think I talked to Bruce McKenna about this. In the wake of Flags of Our Fathers, and I don't mean to disrespect that story, that book, that movie. That is not my intention here, but I'm just being honest with what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I think it lost some money.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, Bruce had to get on a plane and go see Tom Hanks because Tom Hanks was actually saying, hey, maybe World War II isn't relevant anymore. Maybe we don't need to do this.
Well, Hollywood's synonymous for that. Anytime you have a project that has just the same theme as another project, if the original project doesn't do well, it'll put that stink on other projects that may have nothing to do with it other than the same setting. It happens all the time.
Bruce had to go. He got on a plane and went to see Tom because Tom was ready to just pull the plug on it. Maybe it's not relevant. Maybe, we've had Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, and now this thing's not doing that great. It's not making money. And I may be wrong, guys, but I thought Flags of Our Fathers lost like $60 million. Wow. I could be wrong. If I am, I apologize. But I just remember the perception. It really did not do that well. But he got on a plane, went to see Tom Hanks, got him back on board, assured him, yes, Tom, it is relevant. It will always be relevant. We need to do this. And so things got back on track. And then in 2008, we got the call, hey, HBO greenlit it. We're a go. It's happening.
Yeah, according to Wikipedia, although it was considered a box office failure, only grossing $65.9 million against the $90 million budget. So they definitely lost some money there. It's funny you used the phrase, and I told you about this on the phone. When I came across this book, it was because of the documentary that came out on PBS called The War. And yes. And I found the book, the hard copy, at Books A Million on sale, and it has Sid Phillips has a chapter in there, and he says, because my buddy Eugene was a better writer than I ever will be, I want to introduce this paragraph from his book with the old breed, to which I quickly went out on eBay and found this at the time for a steal at $13 because the miniseries hasn't been out yet. And I read this, and I went to Carrie at the time, and I said the same thing that he said. If I literally told her, I was so just floored by this book. I said, if they ever do a miniseries like the Band of Brothers, it has to be about this. And I think it was like 7 months later, they came out, oh, they're making the Pacific, and it's going to be about Eugene Sledge. And I was so happy. But we were kind of talking about some of the inaccuracies earlier about the change of the 45. And it's good thing that Bruce was such a good contact for you as far during production, because there was another thing that the director was wanting to change. And Bruce wasn't down for it, and he knew you wouldn't be down for it, but he had to do his due diligence by reaching out to you and share that story with the listeners, because the people who watch the Pacific will find this quite interesting.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, I will share that, but let me just say, I sat down and watched it last week for the first time since 2010, okay? Because in 2010, when I saw it when it released, I was not happy with it. Let me assure everybody, if anybody really cares, I like it. I think they did a good job.
Well, and at the time, like you were just saying, years had gone by that you were working on this project.
Yeah.
And so, you had a lot invested in it. And before you get to your rewatch, how did you feel about the choosing of the actor to portray your father, Joseph Mazzella?
Yeah, I remember the first time Joe called us. I think they made a good choice. There was definitely a physical resemblance. I will say this, and with no disrespect to anybody, I think the real Sledgehammer was maybe a little tougher than the way he was portrayed.
Well, he was the kid from Jurassic Park, after all. That's where I knew him from originally. It's like, that's the kid from Jurassic Park.
Joe's a nice kid. He did a good job. But, I mean, and I understand. So to defend the way it was done, like the scene where they're moving inland off the beach, and, Akax was, Sledge, goddamn it, you gotta get out of that hole now. Mm-hmm. Come on, Sledge. I mean, if my dad really wrote it accurately, and I'm pretty sure he did because he was a stickler for the truth, he wasn't hiding in a hole having to be told to get out. And I'm not being disrespectful of the way Joe played the part, because I do think he put his heart into it, but to try to see it from the perspective of the filmmakers, they had to show in his character arc, okay, mm-hmm. They had to show the evolution of this kid from Mobile from a genteel background, and he was.
From the boy with the heart murmur.
My grandfather was a doctor. They were pretty well off. And here he is with these young men who came from more blue-collar, rougher backgrounds, but my dad volunteered for it. He wanted to be there. He wanted to go, and there he was. And it's all hell breaking loose at Peleliu on D-Day, but it was for everybody. And they had to show that character evolution from just deer in the headlights, oh my God, what have I got myself into? And then he evolves into, on Okinawa, try these. It helps with the drainage. You see that evolution where he's kind of taking charge. Snafu's over the sledgehammer, check them out, and, okay, Snafu, let's get these boots. Come on. I mean, you can see the evolution.
And Jeff and I have talked about this in past episodes, especially when it comes to Band of Brothers. As you said, you got 10 episodes. You have so many characters. You're trying to get across the broader audience the maturing, the hardening of people in this environment. And so sometimes you have to take an important subject matter, an important thing that happened to a bunch of people that may not have happened to your particular character, and append that story to that character just to get a point across that, not everybody who hit the beach were gun-ho, hard-ass guys. They're, Sid Phillips turned 16 on Guadalcanal. They were freaking kids.
Let me stop you. Sid was 17 when he turned 18 on Guadalcanal.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. He turned 18 on Guadalcanal. But
sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. But there. So back to and plus, I just watched a series too. To give them a little credit, he tried to get out of the foxhole. He slid back in, and then they came screaming, "Get your ass out of there!" But back to the main point. They have to take certain things and append it to somebody that it didn't actually happen to, just to get a point across that these are innocent people who just went from boot camp to being put in the world's most bloody freaking battle in history. And like you're saying, it helps with the character arc.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think Joe put his heart into it. I know when we talked to him, he certainly seemed to understand the gravity of it all. And so I do want to laud him for that. And like I said, I mean, after watching it again and watching all the introductions and thinking about it, kind of letting it all sink in, I thought they did a good job. I mean, and it's something I continue to watch. I mean, I took an 11-year hiatus from it, from all of it, and just was burned out on World War II. But I'm getting back into it, and I've rewatched it twice now. And
it's a testament, kind of like Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers, they get a lot of actors who maybe had a small role here and there, a lot of people we don't know, and now you see those actors all over the place. And I think it's a huge testament to the casting of the Pacific, that the fact that Joseph and the young man who played Snafu went on to play Freddie Mercury and the lead guitarist in Queen. And that also goes to show their on-screen chemistry, that their on-screen chemistry in the Pacific was so great that they were both chosen to work on that Queen project. And so it just goes to show you that, they're damn good actors.
Did you want me to tell the little story of
about the bunker?
Yeah, the bunker scene. Okay. It was really cool to actually see that bunker on Peleliu or Ingusibus when I went to Peleliu in 1999. But so Bruce McKenna called me one day, and he called my mom and my brother, and he said, "Okay, Henry, we're getting really close where we're going to shoot that scene of your father at the bunker. And the director is concerned that at this point we've seen, several hours of a lot of shooting and killing and a lot of blood and gore. And the director's concerned that, the Amtrak came up, fired 2 rounds into the side of the bunker. And then, I mean, the way my dad wrote it to me was just so cool. I mean, I've played that scene over so many times, especially when I went to Peleliu. And as the dust clears, standing in the door or standing in that aperture of the bunker is a Japanese soldier with a grenade trying to hit the percussion cap on his helmet to make it go to throw it at him. My dad draws up with his carbine and just starts squeezing off rounds into his chest. And Bruce said the director doesn't think that shooting the scene that way will convey the proper weight. And he wants to change it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not liking where this is going. What the hell does he want to change it to? And he said, well, he's thinking about having Sledge kill the guy with his bayonet. And I said, well, Bruce, my dad and I talked a lot about all of this stuff when he was alive. And I said, the only problem with that, well, 2 problems. Number one, it's not the way my dad wrote it. You're altering what he wrote in his book. And so you're taking away from the verisimilitude of the whole experience. But I said, I remember being a kid asking my dad, did you ever get into a bayonet fight with a Japanese soldier? And I remember my dad saying, hell no, I never let him get that close to me. We had the carbine, we had the 45, we had the M1. I wasn't going to let him get that close to me. And the Japanese were well known for their skill. Bob, let me show you this. Let's see.
Oh, wow.
My dad took that off a Japanese soldier in the bunker.
Yeah, because in the series they show him picking one up and then throwing it down in disgust, and then that's when
later up in the Umer Brogel he picks it up and he throws it down and then says, "What you doing, Sledgehammer? Don't germs, full of germs." But he got this off a Japanese soldier in the bunker, but so they were going to have him, stab him with his bayonet. And I said, well, I've talked to my dad about that. He was pretty articulate about having never done that. And, well, but, the director's really concerned. And I said, well, Bruce, look, you guys are going to do what the hell you want to do, but you're changing something that I really don't think should be changed. And of course, my mom was just horrified at the idea because just, killing somebody with a bayonet is, I guess, so much more gut wrenching than shooting them repeatedly in the chest, but I said, look, the moral grounds of it don't bother me. It's just the verisimilitude of it. I know he never did that, but anyway, so Bruce said, okay, well, let me go back to the director. We'll talk it over and we'll try to do you proud here. And then we all know, how the scene unfolded.
Well, I'll be honest. The first thing that comes into my mind is I'd have told him, you figure out a way to put that bayonet on a carbine in Peleliu that didn't have a bayonet lug.
True.
And come back to me. Then we'll talk, because I don't see that happening unless they really would have altered history to have a different variant carbine with a bayonet lug on it that wouldn't have been around at that time.
Yeah, because they could have got the same result. They could have got the same result with a K-bar, and that would have been more authentic.
Yeah.
And it's still changing history, but like Jeff said, you can't put you're issued a carbine, you don't have where are you going to put the bayonet?
And not to, because again, I think they did a good job. I like the miniseries. I mean, I really do. I'm going to keep watching. They did a fine job, but in that scene, Bill Layden, who was nothing, the real Bill Layden was nothing like the way he was cast, by the way. He's, of course, the grenade went off. He's Gene. Nobody called my dad Gene. Everybody called him Sledgehammer. I mean, everybody called him Sledgehammer. So I was just kind of like, why are you having? You heard that a lot in the miniseries that they call him Sledgehammer, but that was a little annoying. But
less syllables, easier to tell.
I guess, but But, and when the flamethrower comes up and then, snafus, die, effing die. I mean, my dad was not just sitting there staring at them doing that. I mean, he was involved in the entire process.
Yeah. Well, I think this might be a good place to put a pin in this episode to leave people wanting more. And Henry, if you're up for it, you're more than welcome. Maybe next episode we'll have you back and we'll pick up here and we'll get into a little bit more into it.
Okay.
Sound like a deal? And we want to hear from you guys. Email us, because as Henry was saying at the beginning of the podcast, part of the reason he's doing this is he is really toying with the idea of starting his own podcast because he has a passion. One of the things we haven't got into, maybe we'll talk about a little more next episode, is over the last year or so you've been kind of getting into the voiceover world. And yes. And so we thought, well, what a better way to get comfortable behind a microphone, get comfortable reading copy and getting into the world of voiceover work than not only doing a podcast, but, doing a podcast, sharing more of your father's stories and life that, wasn't covered in a miniseries and, didn't meet that 333 page quota in the book. And, I think you have a lot of interesting stuff that you can, to share. And I would not be surprised that when you start your podcast, if, more family members of, some of the people, that your father served with start sending stuff your way, and it would be amazing to see where it goes. So email us questions for Henry and, email us, let us know, your thoughts on Henry starting up a podcast. I told him off the air, I'd be more than happy to help him, figure out the logistics, all that and all that good stuff. But, on the behalf of Jeff Copsetta and Henry Sledge, we're going to wrap it up, but we'll be back next week. And not next week, but next episode. We want to hear about your trip to Peleliu. You and I have talked about it off the air, and I've talked to other people who's visited those battlegrounds, not only Pacific, but even in Europe, that once you're there and you see it in living color with your own eyes, it's got to make reading the books or watching the TV shows and the history document, it's just got to change everything because you've been there, you've walked that ground, and not to mention the fact that your father was there, and that in itself has just got to be incredible to be there. So we're going to wrap it up. Henry, thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure. I know Jeff's enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I mean, I hope, like I said, keep watching the miniseries. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was good. But I hope people enjoyed this. I mean, I hope they'll want to hear more.
Jeff, you got any closing thoughts, friend?
Yeah, I can't wait to kind of share my first experiences of watching the Pacific for the first time, and Band of Brothers as well. I can't wait to kind of talk from my perspective as well, and some of my thoughts. But we'll save those for next time. And Henry, I just want to say, as a kid growing up, I used to go to different air shows just because certain veterans were going to be there. Like Bob Morgan, the pilot of Memphis Belle, things like that. And I at 38 years old now, I have that same feeling of being able to talk to you. This is like the next best thing for sure at getting to something like that. So yeah, to say that it's been a pleasure for me is certainly an understatement. I can't wait till the next episode.
Well, good. Thank you.
And thank you guys so much. And we will talk to you all next week. Whoop, wrong button. See that? We're good. We're going great. Everything was fantastic. We're being professional. And I go and hit the wrong button because I'm simply trying to play the button of my daughter saying this.
This has been a Digital 410 production.